There's probably been more big sacks of fish caught on the lipless bait than anything else. I mean, I remember when at Kentucky Lake, I mean, giant bags in the 90s, you know, were caught on a lipless bait. I don't know, it's just something about, you know, early pre-spawn. That lipless bait just generates the big ones to eat. You know, basically, it's still pretty cold, and what I'm doing is I'm targeting that little bit of deeper water. Now, you see these pad stems out here, but they're growing in like 4 feet, and this is like the drain, you know, and in that colder, all this stuff around the edge of where I'm fishing is like really shallow, foot deep, or, you know, which is really good spawning habitat. But like the conditions we got, it's not really where they want to be at right now. You know, we've had several days of cold weather and not a lot of sunshine. Now we've got a little sunshine, and it seems like these fish, you know, have pulled back into these drains. You know, hardly anything beats a lipless bait this time of the year, especially when the water temperature really I mean, it can be as cold as 40, you know, they bite a lipless bait when they're set up like this up to, you know, 55 degrees. It's kind of that prime time pre-spawn bite on a lipless bait. Now, one thing that this bait that I'm using is a little different from, you know, more traditional lipless baits is this bait basically, this is a red-eye shad 2-tap, and it really has one distinctive rattle in it. It has a tungsten, so it gives it a totally different sound. It's a little more, not quite as violent action. And the other cool thing about it is it's kind of wild when it deflects off a pad stem or some grass, or it runs up on its side. It just has a great action. The main thing is it shows those fish a sound that they're not, you know, not used to hearing. You know, sometimes for me, I'll rig up both. You know, the more traditional red-eye shad with the BBs, and then a 2-tap, and I'll show them both and find out, you know, which sound. And typically, you know, more times than not, they will love one over the other. And it can even be a situation where what I really like to do with it is I'll typically start with the traditional bait, and once I've shown it to them a lot, I'll go to the 2-tap. You know, because fish, when you're setting on a school of fish and you're throwing the same bait over and over and over, they will get conditioned to that sound. And by putting one with a different sound in there, it's almost like firing up the fish. It's like showing them a bait they've never seen before, yet you've been there for an hour shelling them on one with a different rattle, you know. You know, the other deal this time of year, I'm not burning it. It's more just a steady, I'm a medium, but even in really, really cold water, I don't really ever, with a lipless bait, do what you would say would be a slow retrieve. What I really like to do when the water is extremely cold is you get more deflection. You know, a lot of times the key is to get it hung in some vegetation, or, you know, hit the rock or gravel wherever the fish are setting, and more deflection seems to get more of the bites. Yeah, I'm really trying to fish where there's, right now, around the edge of it, you know, where there's holes in it, you know, places for those fish to set. You know, that's the other thing that happens when it's, you know, when it gets colder, that grass lays down. Even though, like here, you know, most of that grass is coontail, and which it didn't die, but it lays down, and those fish don't get in it. They get on it, on the top of it. But they really seem like big reservoirs all over the country. They like to set in a clean spot. I mean, you could be at Seminole and there'll be giant schools of fish on a sand spot in that hydrilla, you know. And so the whole deal is to pull that bait, you know, across that hole where those fish are setting at. Now, you know, on days it warms up or whatever, they move up and set on top of the grass, but still you're just fishing over it. It falls like a ocho, you know, it shimmies when you let it fall on a slack line. And so when they get off a straight retrieve, you can cast it in them holes when you figure out where they're sitting at and let it go to the bottom, and fish it almost like a worm, you know, and you get that, and then you get that dying quiver. Hey, you know, the big thing what I'm doing right now is I'm looking for a school of fish. And that's the other thing this time of the year. It's hard to beat a lipless bait for that. You know, so I can just cover so much water. And, you know, I'm just looking for those fish in these drains. You know, places that this cold weather, they just suck back off. They're not deep, you know, but they're a couple feet deeper than all the surrounding habitat. And those fish just have a tendency, when we have a big cold front like this, they just suck off in there. So many fish with it are, when you hop it off of something and it has that dying quiver, it's when you'll get bit, you know. Especially the colder the water. Again, you catch more of them in colder water deflecting or hung in vegetation, and it's when the bait pops free and then has that period of slackness. You know, in the summertime or when the water's hot, it's a violence ripping grass. But in the wintertime, it's more of you're more pulling the bait than you are ripping it out of the grass. Like typically now, when you see me pop my rod hard, I can feel a piece of vegetation on the hook, and I'm trying to free the bait of, you know, to get the action back working. But I really just like for it to pull through the grass, and you just, it's that slight or a short period of time that bait free falls is when they get it. And typically, more times than not, when they get it, when you've deflected like that, they eat it. I mean, they'll have it, you know, down their throat, because that bait is falling like a dying bait fish. You know, the biggest difference between the two-tap, we talked about this earlier, and the regular red-eye is the sound. The regular red-eye has more traditional BBs, multi-balls inside that, you know, that rattle, where the two-tap also has a tungsten weight instead of lead, and the tungsten weight is actually what makes the sound. It has a very distinguishable tap to it compared to the, you know, the typical BBs that are in most lipless crankbaits. And so it's just a good idea, like I said before, to have both. And it gives you an opportunity, regardless if you start with the two-tap or you start with the traditional red-eye shad, and you fish in an area over and over and over and they quit biting, just tie the other one on and show them something totally different the next time you're lipless crankbait fishing.